My name is Scott Belsky. I'm the founder and CEO of Behance, a company that's trying to organize the creative world. Well, I think the creative industries are some of the most disorganized industries on the planet. And it's really unfortunate because most ideas never happen. It's just a fact. There are probably more half-written novels in the world than there are novels. It's really frustrating that incredible ideas are conceived and lost in the hands of creative geniuses every day. Why? It's because as creative people, we're constantly generating more and more ideas. It's our essence. It's what we do. It's what we were put on this earth to do, we believe. This is a great thing, and it's a gift, but it's also a great liability. Because unfortunately, the rest of the world suffers because we don't get to have a lot of these ideas realized. Well, one thing we've found is that those with ideas are very hesitant to share them. Usually it's because you're worried about someone might steal them, or sometimes you're worried because it's not fully baked and you don't want to share it until it's perfect. And as a result, they disappear. We stop pursuing these ideas because we move on to something else. We're not held accountable to them. We don't get enough feedback for them to be refined. We suffer because we don't share our ideas. And this is why we find that some of the most productive creative leaders in the world share their ideas liberally. They're always trying to get them out there, even when they're just brand new and they're not fully baked yet. Why? Because they're held accountable to them. Because they get feedback, they get them to be refined better, they identify partners that will help them make them happen. And I think a lot of these creative professionals recognize that the chances of their idea actually happening are increased the more that they share them, rather than decreased. Yeah, in the Behance network, we have tons of examples that we've heard about of people's careers really taking off. One example that I really like is a photographer by the name of Jack Radcliffe, who has done a lot of small photography projects throughout his life. And one of the personal projects he did was called Allison. And what he did is he took pictures of his daughter from the time she was a little girl all the way through to adulthood. Every year he would take photos of her, and he put together this series called Allison that he had never really shared before, publicly. He decides to put it up on the Behance network. Instantly, his whole inner circle of people love it. They start spreading it around. It's on the Behance network featured gallery because so many people are appreciating this piece of work. It ends up getting hundreds of thousands of page views. And then as a result, he ends up getting picked up by a few galleries. He ends up being included in a couple books that are being published on the West Coast. He's, I think, been invited to speak now about the project, and it's really become a cornerstone for his career, is this piece of work that was never really finished until he really was trying to present it and promote it and present it to the world. I think that the Behance network in this case provided the appreciation, the support, the accountability. People were providing him feedback, and it also provided him, most importantly, the exposure that he needed to really have this be a landmark of his career. Well, of the network, 65% of the Behance network is international, is not in US. So it's a very eclectic and international group of people visiting and posting work. I think what that's done is it in many ways has reduced the barriers. Another example of why I think the geography is transcended by this network is there is a great photographer, a wedding photographer based in Brooklyn by the name of Paris Whittingham. And he took a picture of a boy at a wedding, and he called it Brooklyn Boys, a couple of boys sitting with their tuxedos after the wedding. He posted this piece of work up to his portfolio. Another person who really respects his work from India, a guy named Arkan Nair, who's a photo illustrator, sees this piece of work and contacts Paris and says, "Can I illustrate these photographs? I love these new photographs you posted." So Paris sends him the photographs, and then Arkan Nair from India illustrates them. They put it up as a new co-owned project, which means that it lives in both of their portfolios, but it's a project that also circulates throughout the network. It circulates and starts getting tons of appreciations and tons of views, including from Kanye West. Kanye West discovers this piece of illustrated photography and decides to put it on his blog on Kanye University. it just explodes. Hundreds of people start commenting on it. Kanye West loves it. And then Paris and Arkane both start getting new opportunities and a lot of fanfare. And it just becomes a real highlight of their year. I mean, and this is the potential. Someone from Brooklyn, someone from India, this joint piece of work, exposure, Kanye West finding it. I mean, this is the kind of thing that can happen with a platform like Behance. And I mean, we're humbled by the power of just the geographies being transcended by this interconnectedness in the network. Well, I think one power shift that's going on in the creative world is the creative professionals themselves having more power over their careers. I was recently on a panel for a big advertising week in New York. Advertising week, all the big ad agencies came together. I was on a panel called A Shortage of Digital Talent. And all of these big ad executives were talking about how there's a shortage of digital talent out there. There are fewer people than ever before. I disagree. I think there are more, but they don't want to work in small little cubes and agencies on Madison Avenue. They want to work on their own terms. They want to work with their own hardware and software. They want to work on projects that they're motivated and passionate about. So the problem is that we're not engaging talent on their terms. And that's what's unique and new about now, is that incredible talent can work on their own, can represent themselves, can develop their own careers. They don't have to work at an agency anymore. They can really build their own enterprise, their own brand. Agencies usually don't like it when a creative takes credit for the work they did for a client. It has to be under the agency name. But now is an opportunity where I can go out and say, I did this for this client. Agencies need to catch up. They need to recognize that that's the way to gain great, talented people to work with, is to let them own the process. That's why we need to have better platforms out there to organize creative talent, to enable people to find each other. That's also why we need to have better project management tools and methodologies out there to help creatives stay organized and be able to manage themselves. Because before, you always had an account manager or someone who was overseeing the creative team. The creative team was seen as this group of people who could never get their shit together, And how do you manage them? Oh, you have to have people who are overseeing what they do every day. That's treating creative talent like children. It's wrong. These are people who should learn how to manage themselves, to lead themselves, their own teams. They can do it. I believe that ideas can be made to happen through great leadership, through great organization, and through leveraging communal forces, the community around us. And I think that's the era upon us, is you're going to see more and more creative professionals representing themselves. Self-marketing is important. And we have, in our interviews, we've interviewed a lot of creative professionals who are very effective at being known and respected for their work. And it's not an accident. It's not like their work is just so good that everyone sees it. It is an intentional pursuit on their part to make sure that they're admired and respected for the strengths that they have. But it's not in a self-promotional context. It's not like, I want to make sure everyone knows my name. I want to make sure everyone respects the work that I do. And they take that very seriously. And they use platforms, some social platforms, organizational platforms like the Behance Network, to make sure that their work is seen in the right audience by the right people and in a respectable format. It's not a self-promotional format. But people need to be known, people need to be told what they're looking at. There's a great little story I talk about sometimes in conferences about a famous violinist named Joshua Bell. He's probably one of the world's most famous living violinists at the moment. And there was a time he was in Washington, D.C. performing for the President of the United States. And then the next day, they did an experiment with him. They gave him, I believe it was a $3 million violin on loan from some museum. They put him in the D.C. metro station during rush hour. And they dressed him in street clothes and had him play some of the most beautiful classical music ever written. And the experiment was, here you have one of the world's greatest violinists playing the most expensive violin, the most beautiful classical pieces ever written. Will anyone notice? Rush hour, over 1,000 people passed him. And I think he made like $32.17. $20 was from one of the few people that recognized him. And they interviewed people on the escalators going up and down after listening to his music. And some of these people said, oh yeah, the guy who's there every morning. People don't know what they're listening to and what they're looking at sometimes unless they're told. Unless they're told like what aspects of it to respect. If he had had a sign saying, I'm playing a $3 million violin and I just played for the president last night and I'm playing for you now. If they had been told this stuff, or if other people had been able to, other real musicians had been able to listen to this and say, this is great, listen to this, people would have maybe stopped and recognized the strengths of the person that was playing before them. As creatives, we need to make sure that we don't live a life with incredible strengths and talents that are never recognized. It is our responsibility to make sure that our work is showcased in an audience of people who will appreciate it and then therefore respect it, help it be more seen by more people, and really help develop our careers. And that doesn't happen by accident. It's a very intentional pursuit. And I think that there's technology out there like Behance that can help make that happen.